ladder.
I'm not getting very far here. One of the things that you hear a lot about and people sometimes seem to perhaps obsess over is credit scores. So different credit reference agencies apply different numbers and things like that. You know, you see 999 is great and, you know, poor, average, great, excellent. As a first-time buyer or maybe someone who hasn't bought a property for a long period of time, these can sometimes seem a little daunting or a little confusing. So what exactly is a credit score and what does Penrith do with a credit score?
Okay. So let's look at the first bit. So the credit score is really just a reflection of your overall credit performance.
Okay.
So it's how long have you been on the voters roll, how much credit have you got, how much of it are you utilising, how do you maintain it, and all those sort of elements actually go together to build up that score. You've mentioned 999, and that's quite interesting because there are several credit reference agencies out there and they all use their own metrics. So what's great on one at 999, fab, on another great maybe 700.
Yeah.
So try not to get too hung up on numbers. I know that when our intermediaries come to us, they very often quote the scores. They'll say, "Oh, I've got a client that's got a score of,"
or it's excellent, or
it's 910, and that certainly does give us a good view. But the devil really is in the detail,
of course,
on these things, and that's where we'll really want to have a good look at the report and see what's actually in the report, to look at their credit utilisation. Have they taken payday loans, for example? Because there's some forms of credit that can sometimes have a bit of a negative effect as well. So are they looking at short-term borrowing? Are they taking cash advances on their credit card as well? So Penrith, when they actually get the case, will have a look at the report in its entirety,
right,
and want to see that we've got somebody that's using credit wisely. But that's not to say that if somebody's had a bit of an issue in the past that the case will be
completely
declined, because that's not right, fair or proper. We will want to try and understand what's individual circumstances, and I think as a small society that is something that we do really, really well, and the fact that we've got a consistent team used to looking at cases, and we have got a sympathetic ear, because I do say it quite a lot, but bad things happen to good people.
Your go?
My go, right. Oh, look at that.
So that's probably quite a good kind of, I guess, leads nicely onto a question I was going to put to you about what I can do to kind of improve my position and improve my credit score. So, I might be, say for example, I've just come out of university, I've never had a credit card, I've never had the reason to take out a loan, so I'm kind of a bit of a blank canvas. To someone in that position, what sort of things would they want to consider before, as they maybe start to think about buying a property and, obviously the implications of their credit file?
Well, there's a couple of things to sort of mention there. The first is with the Penrith, if you haven't had a huge amount of credit, it doesn't actually go against you. Okay. Much as we want to make sure any you've maintained well, if you are a bit of a blank canvas and maybe you're not keen on taking out credit, because there are some people out there that really do live quite traditionally and sort of work by the belief that if I can't afford it, then I'll wait, or I'll go without. You don't have to take it if you want to come to Penrith just to build up your credit profile. But if you are generally looking at your credit score health and you want to improve it, then yes, having some facilities there certainly will help improve that score for you overall. Having the likes of maybe a credit card but only have a small limit on it. You don't have to have an enormous limit on
thousands and thousands, or
yeah, exactly. Just be realistic, and maybe use it. Just say, well, I'm going to put my petrol on it, and as soon as I put my petrol on it, I'll pay it off. Yeah. So I'm not actually building up any debt with it, but it is showing that I'm actually using the card. But there are other things that people can do that will improve their score that it won't actually involve credit.
Okay.
So for example, make sure you're on the voters roll, which is a really key thing. Whether you want to vote or not, is really irrelevant, but get yourself on there, because then that gets you a decent number of points, because a lender, when they're looking at you, will actually see that you have a permanent base.
Okay.
And then if you do have commitments, make sure you get them set up with regular payment facilities. So pay your credit card minimum balance on a direct debit. Don't wait to go into the bank to do it, because something will happen to stop you getting there to make that payment, and then it's registered as a late, which is just so frustrating. Even if it's the minimum amount that you pay each month by DD, at least you're avoiding that late payment marker as well. So there's a couple of things that you can do there without having to take out excessive amounts of credit. And then when you do think about taking out credit, think about what you take. There were myths going around in the industry a number of years ago around taking payday loans. Take a short-term loan, pay it straight back. Actually, that's not great. Don't do that.
No, that's good. I've got a few myths for you later that I'm going to throw at you that you can just beat a bust. That was one of them. So I think, is it my go now?
It is.
Yes,
It is. Oh. Narrowly avoiding them.
I'm just missing the pitfalls here. So my myths. So there was a few that I've heard in the past, both professionally and personally, about credit and what it can mean. So one of them that comes up every so often is this notion of like a blacklist. So I've made some mistakes in the past, or I've been made bankrupt or whatever, and I'm so untouchable that I'm on this naughty list and I'll never get a mortgage. Is that true? Are there people whose credit is so bad that lenders will simply just not want to have anything to do with them?
Potentially. It does depend on really how bad it is, but you could also run with the adage that there's a lender out there for everybody. You will tend to find that if somebody has had exceptionally poor credit in the past, that lenders will look to price for risk.
Right.
Which is not an unreasonable stance for them to take, particularly if you have had somebody that's maybe had multiple events over the years. And the lender will then look to price the proposition that they're offering that borrower accordingly.
Right.
So essentially that just means you're going to pay a higher rate. Yeah.
Understand that. It's your go. Yeah.
I go.
Right, and my next one was going to be, I think you touched on this earlier about credit. So I've never had the need to take any credit out. I've always had money available to pay. I've got a second-hand car which I bought in cash, so I've never used any credit. Is that going to make things easier or harder for me?
It does depend on who you approach. Some lenders will expect to see you having had good credit utilisation over a certain period and will expect you to have a good score. Other lenders, such as Penrith, that will actually look at your overall credit performance, will not be concerned by that, as long as we can still see, as I think you mentioned, voters roll. Get yourself on the voters roll.
Stuff in the present, yeah.
Absolutely. Let's see you've got a current account, that you're not living in your overdraft the whole time. Because very often people don't view overdrafts as credit, but they are.
Often banks will offer them, as standard without even know. So I can understand why. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Oh dear. I think I've just hit a credit.
Oh yeah.
I'm going backwards.
So this is my last myth, I suppose, and it relates to maybe joint applicants. So if I'm approaching a lender because I want a mortgage and my partner's had a lot of credit issues in the past, I'm being told that it's never going to work because my partner's had these really bad historic issues with credit, and therefore by association I'm deemed just as much of a potential risk. Is that something that's kind of commonplace? Is that true? Does that seem fair?
It certainly doesn't seem fair at all. And if you have had one particular party who has had significant issues in the past, it does seem dreadfully unfair to then, although you are financially associated, tarnish you with that same brush, because particularly considering you may well have actually managed your own affairs appropriately without any issue. So when a credit report is run, although you may be financially associated with somebody, it is your information that the lender should be looking at. So the report may well reference that there is a financial association, but if the lender's actually looking at your credit profile, it should be pulling through your information and not
separate,
your your partner's information. So no, lenders shouldn't be doing it unless you are applying jointly. If you are applying jointly, then yes, they will look at both sets.
And what about if I want to approach Penrith and my partner had these credit issues, but we didn't, maybe the partner's not working, or they've got a relatively low income, so we don't necessarily need them to contribute actively to the mortgage as such. Would you insist on my partner going on the mortgage with me, or could I just take that out in my own name?
You could potentially take it out in your own name, but equally, because we're the kind of lender that you can have a conversation with if there were historic issues and there was a really legitimate reason for these problems occurring in the past, that's where it's worth actually having a conversation with us. So picking up the phone, giving us, we always want to know the more information that you or your intermediary can give us, the better, because then we can actually make an informed decision about the case. We're very often happy to even look at if the client's dealing with a broker and the broker can get a copy of the credit file over to us, we're even happy to have a look at those in advance of us as the lender actually doing the search. Because it means then that we won't, and this is something we haven't touched on, but if the borrower provides us with a copy of the search for us to make a decision in principle, so to speak, we won't then be doing our own search at that point. We'll do one later, but we won't be leaving an additional footprint on their credit file. The more footprints you have, the more searches you have, can be an issue.
Okay, good.